Hello, welcome to Radio Row at Super Bowl 57, live from the Phoenix Convention Center. I am Roy Kessel, joined by Caleb Bradham for Sports Philanthropy Network, and we're very excited to have with us special guest Eric Hipple. Eric is a former NFL quarterback, many years with the Detroit Lions, and still lives in the Detroit area, doing incredible work with many different types of organizations. So, Eric, welcome to the show. We're excited to learn more about all the different projects you're involved with.
Thanks, Roy. Much appreciated, and thanks for having me on. And what you guys do is fantastic as well. So, foundation support is always there, and it's great.
Thank you. Eric, I want to talk to you a little bit. Lee Steinberg and Dr. Nicole Roberts were just on. You were sitting across the table with your brother who is here today. So also we'll just shout him out, right? Because family is
Yeah,
everything. At the end of the day,
yeah,
football's over, but family is everything. Question for
it
you. We're
is, and I don't
talking.
get to see him that often, so it's great. Anyway,
I love it. I think it's wonderful. Nicole and Lee were here. We're talking about the Brain Health Summit. We're talking about concussions, and you're sitting right across the table because you're a part of that. Tell us where you fit in, Eric.
well, my entrance into that world really was on the mental health side. I started working in mental health and working with players going through transition. When they have to leave the game, there's a lot of psychological things that can happen to somebody in that. The loss of identity, the loss of support systems. Financial money's kind of come to an end. At least, maybe not your cash flow, but it comes. So there's a whole thing that happens to a person in that transition. It can be really tough. And so working with that, what happened was, and then in 2000 or 92 or whatever it was, 2000, no, 2000. Forget what year they had in the Chicago when they had the announcement. Anyway, the NFL came out and finally said yes, concussions do cause brain damage. And but they wouldn't talk a lot about it. It was just they made the announcement because they had to, because the science was there. And when that happened, we started getting an influx of players that would now talk about their symptoms of depression and stuff that they were having that they wouldn't talk about before because of mental health, right? But all of a sudden now they had something to lay it on, and they could say, "Good, I want to see somebody about my concussions." And so that's where I got into the brain injury side of it. I had myself tested and found out one of the things that can happen to a player that's had many concussions is you can have pituitary dysfunction, pituitary damage, and so that means the hormones aren't being released like they should be. So you get guys that don't have low or zero HGH, low testosterone, even cortisol levels can be off, and so and that's a lot to do with quality of life. And so you put those two things together, it was kind of like a really bad storm for players, after they leave the game from one the psychological side, but also the brain injury side.
Yeah, I think one of the things, Eric, you talked about it is how late in the game the NFL and really the NFLPA as well were at getting into the discussion of the damage coming out of concussions. Um, and this has been going on for decades and decades, right? And so the damage wasn't easily identified. We often talk about concussions being an invisible injury because if you tear your ACL or you snap an ankle, people can see that on the field. They can see you hobbling around. But when somebody goes through uh, brain injury, concussion symptoms, post concussion symptoms, they're walking around and people can't necessarily tell the difference. Why is somebody seen out of sorts? Why is their balance off? Their reaction time is diminished. Their sensitivity to noise and light heightened. Um, it's amazing to me, right? You were involved with a lot of years. You think of all of the medical care and treatment that's there. So two things. One is why did it take so long in general? And then my second question, somewhat on the soapbox, is how does the NFLPA get off virtually scot free with dealing with this issue or taking blame for this issue? Because when you look at what's gone on, right, the NFL gets most of the attention at not having handled the issue, and the PA is sort of in the background dealing with it. It's their job to fight for the players. Why do you think it is that they really have not taken as much of a leadership role in this fight?
Well, so there's an answer that's not that I'm going to give you that is probably not much appreciated by either side. Um, but since the 90s, when we actually disbanded the union, when the lawsuit happened, and all of a sudden they couldn't have the draft, they couldn't do individual contracts, and they couldn't share revenues. And so they came crawling back and said, quick, we want to have a union again because they need it because this lawsuit was an antitrust law. So anyway, we came back together as an association. Okay, and so in the association now we can bargain in good faith and whatnot. But when they did that, they started sharing revenues, and that meant that the NFL benefits, and so does the NFLPA benefit for the maximizing the money. So they're both trying to maximize the income. And when you do that, and you have something that could come along and could say actually stop the game from having players be on the field, they both had incentive not to do something about it. And they were forced to because of the science. They were forced to because of players. And they were forced to because guys like Lee Steinberg, who made it a deal and started talking to players and forced the issue. And so he's been a big part of why those changes happen. But that's quite frankly it. I mean, there's an incentive to have, and it's not just all them either. I mean, players they're at fault as well. I was one of those guys. If I got hit and dingy, I'd go back in because it was almost like wearing a badge of honor. Oh yeah, look at man, I'm fine now. Look what I went through. And players wouldn't want to come out of the game. I wouldn't want to come out. I mean, I have a huge hit on YouTube. It's called Hipple Gets Hit. Basically, my helmet goes flying off, and I get knocked out of bounds, and I'm laying there squirming. But I went back in 3 plays later. I mean, and that's how it was. And so, players are at fault as well, just for not understanding exactly what can be done. The brain damage that happens.
So, Eric, I want to talk to you for a second about that player health and safety component. Roy and I were invited down to the owners' meetings at the Breakers last year, and it was great to actually be a part of the player health and safety. So, we see the committees, we see all of the long hours that they're debating and creating a strategy. And Roger Goodell and the host committee come out to talk about that, and they say, we're really working on turf, and we're doing all of the scientific calculations. We're really working on making sure that the guys are wearing guardian helmets. We're not going to have any tackles until X number of weeks into the preseason. That's great, right? It's not the answer. I'm gonna give the NFL a thumbs up because are they perfect? No. Are they trying? I believe seeing the meetings as far as what we saw taking place. Yeah, I believe they're working on it. In your opinion, where's the lag? What's lacking? What do we need to do better from a player health and safety? I know you have some NFL alumni health guys with you today. What's next, and what do we have to do better?
Well, I think one of the things is after. So we've got everything for protection, trying to stop the concussions. The velocity. You can't stop the velocity when guys get hit, and it's just the brain shake it causes concussions as well. So it's velocity when the velocity stops or rotation. So you can't build a better helmet that can stop that. You can minimize it, and I think they are doing a good job of that. Their protocols are at least approaching that part of it. But I really believe that, and you heard Lee talk about some of this stuff, and Nicole talk about some of the treatments that are going on after. And I really believe that that's where we should hold them to the fire, which is after a player has gone through and can actually have have their brain examined, but also some of the treatments that are available to basically get back a quality of life, and not suffer it longer. And there's some things that are available. Lee talked about a couple of the things that he's done. Um, QEEG, the stuff, being able to see the brain, for a snapshot, so you can see the injury. Myself, we were involved in a study. Right now, we're approaching 50 players is what we're looking for the study, but it's a double-blind study. But so it goes a year. You're asking some guy to come in involved for a year. He might be on a placebo for a year. But through the replacement therapy on the hormone side, we found that quality of life comes back, but it's a commitment. It is a medication. You have to take it, but it's HGH, which gets a bad name by by Hollywood. It's not the fountain of youth, but it does help the brain and heal the brain. That's when you're not functioning, it's like having a pre-aging brain when you don't have those chemicals or those hormones going. And so replacement therapy does bring the quality of life back.
Eric, I think that quality of life issue is really important because I know when I was running a company called Sports Brain, we dealt with former athletes, not only from football, hockey, other sports, other impact sports, and using a neurofeedback system to help them get relief from some of the symptoms that they're going
Yeah.
through, whether that's depression, memory, lack of ability to sleep, things of that nature. And we're learning more every day about CTE and its debilitating effects. Unfortunately, once somebody's taking those hits, there hasn't been any real evidence that we have any way to reverse the damage from CTE at this point in time. But there's lots of things that are out there that can help relieve some of the symptoms and some of the problems that go along with it. So if you're going to live for another 20, 30, 40 years, you'd much better off even if you die with CTE ultimately, right? But having relief from those other symptoms. So I know you've been looking at a variety of different ways to do that, and I'd love to have you share some of your insight that you've gained over the last decade.
Well, quite frankly, the off-label TMS, it works, but not everybody can take the time. Like Lee, I think had 90 visits. Not everybody can do that at certain times, right? And so I've been involved with the HBOT when they first came out, doing the deep dives on hyperbaric chambers, QEEG. In fact, we actually used neurofeedback in the addiction area as well. And so there's things you can do, right? Some of them have a commitment of time. There's not a magic pill you can take to do it. Um, the medication that we're doing obviously is HGH, but it does postpone. I won't say postpone. It delays the process of maybe CTE. Once you start getting the tangles inside your brain and starts, getting sticking, tacking, starting to mess with the neurons and stuff, it's kind of hard. But you can slow down that process by having a good, healthy brain, and that means maybe replacing some of those hormones. That's what we're looking at right now. And I started this about 7 years ago on myself. I went and got tested, and I had like zero growth hormone and like very, very low testosterone. And so I thought, well, I'm a quarterback. I got knocked down a lot, but I don't really have, any knockouts where I lost consciousness or anything like that. But yet it's the accumulation of buildup that happens. So guys are getting hit every play. The linemen and stuff. I think this is something that basically they can do to kind of delay the CTE.
Well, Eric, I want to say thank you for joining us. I think it takes a lot of transparency and vulnerability to have a big, strong football guy come on and talk about low testosterone and hormone dysfunction and all of these things, but they're very real, right? So I
Yeah.
think it takes a real man to be vulnerable and open about, I took some hits. This is what happened to me. This is how we're going to fix it. I want to thank you. I know you could be on any interview panel throughout Radio Row. You chose to come here, and that means a lot to me. Folks, my name is Kayla Bradham. I'm here with my partner, Roy Kessel from Sports Philanthropy Network, joined by Eric Hipple, NFL alumni quarterback for many years for the Detroit Lions, reminding you to live generously. Thank you, Eric.